Hello, I'm Lucy. I'm 63 years old, and I never imagined that my daughter's wedding day would also be the day my life changed forever. I was sitting alone in the third row of the church, watching guests stream in with animated groups, laughing, hugging, and taking photos. Everyone seemed to have someone by their side, everyone except me. My husband Thomas had passed away 3 years ago, taken by cancer that consumed him silently. Since then, I'd learned to live with the absence, but on that day, it weighed heavier than ever. My daughter, Jennifer, looked radiant. I saw her from afar, adjusting her veil with the bridesmaids, smiling nervously. I felt a tightness in my chest. Thomas should be here. He should be walking her down the aisle, giving her hand to the groom, making the emotional speech he'd been mentally rehearsing since she was born. But he wasn't, and I was alone. I looked around. My sister was seated with her husband. My cousins formed a small clan in the right corner. And even distant acquaintances seemed to have company. I felt a lump in my throat. It wasn't self-pity. It was simply the realization that life had moved on for everyone except me. I remained stuck on that hospital day. That last breath. That goodbye. That never seemed enough. The music began to play. The groom, a young man with clear eyes and a shy smile named Daniel, entered accompanied by an older woman, probably his mother. Then came the groomsmen, the bridesmaids, and then the moment. Jennifer appeared at the church door, alone, holding the bouquet with both hands. My heart tightened. She had insisted on entering alone, saying it was a tribute to her father. But I knew that deep down, she also felt the absence like a hole in her chest. That's when I felt a presence beside me. A man with gray hair, wearing an impeccable navy blue suit, sat down in the empty chair next to me. He leaned slightly toward me and whispered in a soft but firm voice, "Pretend you're with me." I looked at him, confused, but something in his gaze was kind, almost protective. He smiled discreetly and nodded forward, as if we'd been there together for years. I didn't fully understand the gesture, but I felt an inexplicable relief. Suddenly, I wasn't alone anymore. Jennifer passed by us, and her eyes met mine for a brief second. She blinked, surprised, looking at the man beside me. I smiled back, trying to convey calm. She continued forward, but I noticed something had changed in her expression. There was curiosity, perhaps even a slight relief. When the ceremony began, the man beside me remained quiet, respectful. He didn't try to make conversation, didn't ask questions. He just stayed there, a silent presence that somehow made everything more bearable. I didn't know who he was, but in that moment, he gave me what I needed most. The feeling of not being completely alone. The ceremony was beautiful. The pastor spoke about love, commitment, the union of two families. I tried to focus on the words, on Jennifer's happiness, on Daniel's loving gaze. But every few minutes, my eyes would drift to the empty space where Thomas should have been standing, where he should have been crying with pride, where he should have been squeezing my hand and whispering, "We did good, didn't we?" The man beside me seemed to sense my internal struggle. At one point, when my eyes began to well up, he quietly slid a clean handkerchief toward me. I took it gratefully, dabbing at my eyes, trying not to draw attention. He didn't look at me, didn't make a fuss. He simply offered a small act of kindness that meant more than he could have known. When Jennifer and Daniel exchanged vows, I heard her voice crack slightly as she said, "I wish my father could be here to see this." The church fell silent for a moment, a collective acknowledgement of the absence we all felt. I saw Daniel squeeze her hands tighter, saw the pastor nod with understanding, and I felt the man beside me shift slightly closer, a wordless gesture of support. As the newlyweds kissed and the church erupted in applause, I found myself clapping too, genuine joy mixing with the bittersweet ache in my chest. Jennifer was happy. She was beginning a new chapter, and maybe, just maybe, it was time for me to consider that possibility for myself too. When the recessional music played and the happy couple made their way down the aisle, Jennifer paused briefly as she passed our row. She looked at me, then at the man beside me, and gave a small, questioning smile. I nodded reassuringly, and she continued on, her face glowing with happiness. As the church began to empty, the man stood and offered me his hand to help me up. I took it, feeling the warmth and strength in his grasp. He didn't let go immediately, and when I looked up at him, he said simply, "You have a beautiful daughter." This was a lovely ceremony. "Thank you," I managed to say, my voice thick with emotion. "And thank you for sitting with me." He smiled, a warm, genuine smile that reached his eyes. "It was my pleasure. Shall we head to the reception?" I nodded, and as we walked out of the church together, I realized that for the first time in 3 years, I didn't feel the crushing weight of loneliness quite so heavily. After the ceremony, Guests made their way to the reception in an elegant hall decorated with white flowers and soft lighting. I was still processing what had happened in the church. Who was that man? Why had he done that? I found my sister, Patricia, near the beverage table. She hugged me tightly and said, "Lucy, you looked beautiful in the church. And who was that gentleman sitting next to you? I thought you'd brought someone and didn't tell me." I laughed, embarrassed. "I'd like to know too. He just appeared." Patricia's eyes widened. Appeared? Out of nowhere? Yes. He sat next to me and told me to pretend I was with him. She was silent for a moment, processing, and then smiled. What old-fashioned chivalry. Maybe he noticed you were alone and wanted to help. Maybe, I replied, still intrigued. During dinner, I sat at the main table next to Jennifer. She was radiant, but restless. In the middle of the meal, she leaned toward me and whispered, "Mom, who was that man in the church?" "I don't know, sweetheart. He just sat down next to me." "Are you okay?" She seemed worried. "I am, honey. I promise." She squeezed my hand and smiled, but I could tell something was bothering her. Maybe it was the idea of seeing me with someone else. Maybe it was just the emotion of the day. I didn't know, but I didn't want her to worry about me. Not on that day. It was during the newlyweds' waltz that I saw him again. He was seated at a table near the dance floor, watching the couple with a discreet smile. Our eyes met for an instant, and he nodded slightly. I returned the gesture, feeling a strange connection. Minutes later, he approached me. He brought 2 glasses of champagne and offered one. "Sorry for the intrusion at the church," he said with a kind smile. "I noticed you were alone and thought that perhaps it would be easier that way." I accepted the glass and smiled. "Thank you. It was kind of you. I'm Robert." He extended his hand. "Father of the groom." "Lucy," I replied, shaking his hand. "Mother of the bride." We laughed together, and the tension I'd been feeling since morning finally began to dissipate. Robert was a widower, just like me. He had lost his wife, Margaret, 4 years ago in a car accident. He spoke of her fondly, but without the devastating pain I still felt when I mentioned Thomas. There was an acceptance in his voice, a peace I was still seeking. We talked for hours. He told me about his career as an architect, about the projects he'd developed throughout his life, about the pride he felt for Daniel. I spoke about my life as a literature teacher, about Jennifer, about the books I loved that helped me get through lonely days. There was an ease between us that surprised me. It wasn't forced. It wasn't awkward. It was natural, as if we'd known each other for years. As the conversation flowed, I learned more about Robert's life. He'd been married to Margaret for 35 years. They'd met in college, both studying at the same university, though in different programs. She'd been a nurse, passionate about helping people, always putting others first. Their love story sounded like something from a book. Steady, reliable, full of small everyday moments that built a lifetime together. "We had our ups and downs like any couple," Robert said, swirling the champagne in his glass thoughtfully. "But we always found our way back to each other. She was my best friend, you know, the person I wanted to tell everything to." I nodded, understanding completely. That's how it was with Thomas. He was my rock. When he got sick, it felt like the ground disappeared beneath my feet. "How long were you married?" Robert asked gently. 38 years, I said, feeling both pride and sadness in that number. "We met when I was just out of college, teaching my first year of high school English. He came to a parent-teacher conference for his nephew. His sister had asked him to go because she was sick. We started talking about literature, and I mentioned I was reading Hemingway. He said he preferred Fitzgerald. We argued about it for 20 minutes. Robert chuckled. "And that was it?" "That was it," I confirmed, smiling at the memory. "He asked me to coffee the next week so we could continue the debate. We never stopped talking after that." "Margaret and I had a similar start," Robert said. "We met at a campus coffee shop. I spilled my coffee all over her nursing textbook. She was furious. I offered to buy her a new book and a new coffee. She said I could buy the coffee, but she'd keep the stained book because it would remind her to watch out for clumsy architects." We both laughed, and I realized how good it felt to laugh, to share these memories without feeling like I was betraying the past. Robert understood. He'd been there. He knew the guilt that came with moving forward, the fear of forgetting, the loneliness that settled in your bones and made a home there. "Do you have other children besides Daniel?" I asked. "No, just Daniel. We wanted more, but it didn't happen for us." "You?" "Just Jennifer. We tried for years to have another, but after 3 miscarriages, we decided to be grateful for the one miracle we had." Robert nodded sympathetically. "Jennifer seems wonderful. You clearly raised her well." "Thank you. Daniel seems like a good man too. Jennifer is lucky." "I think they're both lucky," Robert said, his eyes moving to where our children were dancing together, lost in their own world. "It's funny, isn't it? We spend years raising them, worrying about them, hoping they'll find happiness, and then one day, they do. And we're left wondering where the time went. And wondering what comes next for us, I added quietly. Robert looked at me directly then, his brown eyes warm and understanding. Yes, exactly that. When the party began to wind down, Robert walked me to my car. Before I got in, he said, "I'd like to see you again, Lucy. If you'd like, of course." I looked at him, feeling a mixture of fear and hope. I think I'd like that." He smiled, and something inside me ignited for the first time in years. He pulled out his wallet and handed me a business card, but then took it back and pulled out a pen, writing on the back, "The front is my work number. The back is my personal cell. Call me anytime." Really? I took the card, running my thumb over the handwritten numbers. "Okay. Drive safe, Lucy." "You too, Robert." As I drove home that night, I kept glancing at the card on my passenger seat. The wedding had been beautiful. Jennifer had been radiant, and I'd survived the day without falling apart. But more than that, something unexpected had happened, something I hadn't been looking for, hadn't even thought I wanted. I'd felt a connection, a spark of possibility, and it terrified me. The days following the wedding were strange. I didn't expect anything, but I also couldn't stop thinking about Robert. He'd given me his card with a phone number scribbled by hand on the back. I looked at that piece of paper dozens of times without the courage to dial. It was Jennifer who, indirectly, gave me the push I needed. She called me a week after the wedding, anxious. "Mom, you need to tell me. Who was that man? Daniel said it was his father that you talked all night." I sighed. "It was Robert, honey. Daniel's father." There was silence on the other end of the line. And nothing. We talked. He was kind. "Mom!" Jennifer sounded exasperated. "Did he give you his number?" "He did." "And did you call?" "Not yet." "Why not?" I didn't know how to answer. Maybe it was fear. Fear of betraying Thomas's memory. Fear of getting hurt again. Fear that moment at the wedding had been just that, a moment. But Jennifer, with the stubbornness she inherited from her father, didn't give up. "Mom, Dad wouldn't want you to be alone forever. He loved you too much for that." Those words echoed in my mind. That night, I picked up Robert's card and dialed the number. He answered on the second ring. "Hello, Robert? It's Lucy." There was a pause, and then he said with a smile evident in his voice, "Lucy, I was hoping you'd call." We talked for over an hour. He invited me for coffee that weekend at a small cafe in the downtown area. I accepted, nervous but curious. Our first date was simple but perfect. We sat at a table by the window, had coffee, and ate apple pie while talking about everything and nothing. He made me laugh, something I hadn't done frequently since Thomas passed. The cafe was called Corner Books and Brew, a cozy place that combined a bookstore with a coffee shop. The smell of fresh coffee mixed with old paper and soft jazz played in the background. Robert had chosen well. It was exactly the kind of place I loved. "I wasn't sure if you'd actually call," Robert admitted as we settled into our seats. "I almost didn't," I confessed. "I stared at your card for a week, picking it up and putting it down dozens of times." "What made you finally dial?" "My daughter. She told me her father wouldn't want me to be alone forever." Robert nodded slowly. "Daniel told me something similar. He said his mother would want me to be happy, that she'd be angry if I spent the rest of my life alone in that big house, talking to her photographs." "Do you do that? Talk to her photographs?" "Sometimes," he admitted without embarrassment. "Do you?" "All the time," I said. "I have this picture of Thomas on my nightstand. Every morning I tell him about my dreams. Every night I tell him about my day. I know it probably sounds crazy. It doesn't sound crazy at all. It sounds like love." The simplicity and understanding in his words made my eyes water. I looked away, blinking rapidly. "I'm sorry," I said. "I didn't mean to get emotional." "Don't apologize, Lucy. Grief doesn't have a timeline. Neither does healing." We talked about our spouses without guilt or restraint. Robert told me about Margaret's laugh, how she would snort when something was really funny, and how embarrassed she'd get afterward. I told him about Thomas's terrible singing voice, how he'd belt out oldies in the shower and make up half the words. "Do you know what I miss most?" Robert asked. "The mundane things, making breakfast together on Sunday mornings, the way she'd steal the blankets at night, arguing about what to watch on TV." "Yes," I breathed. "The ordinary moments. Those are the ones that haunt you." Our coffee date turned into a 3-hour conversation. We browsed the bookstore section together, and I discovered that Robert loved mystery novels. He discovered I had a weakness for poetry. We recommended books to each other, and before we left, we each bought a book the other had suggested. "This is homework," Robert said with a smile, holding up the poetry collection I'd recommended. "We'll have to meet again to discuss." "Is that your way of asking for a second date?" I asked, feeling bolder than I had in years. "Is it working?" "Yes." The dates became frequent. Walks in the park, quiet dinners, visits to museums and bookstores. Robert had a way of making me feel seen, heard, valued. He wasn't trying to replace Thomas, wasn't trying to erase the past. He was simply there, present, patient, kind. One afternoon, we visited an art museum. Robert stood before an abstract painting for a long time, studying it intently. I watched him, curious about what he was thinking. "What do you see?" I asked. "Chaos finding order," he said. "Or maybe order finding chaos. I can't decide which." "What does that mean to you?" He turned to me. "It means that sometimes life falls apart, and we think we'll never put it back together. But then somehow, in ways we never expected, the pieces start to form something new. Not the same as before, but still whole, still beautiful." I understood what he wasn't saying directly. He was talking about us, about loss, about rebuilding. "I like that interpretation," I said softly. We continued through the museum, and at some point our hands brushed together. Neither of us pulled away. By the time we reached the sculpture garden, we were holding hands, and it felt like the most natural thing in the world. It was on an autumn afternoon, while we were walking through a park covered with golden leaves, that he held my hand for the first time with intention. I looked at him, surprised, and he smiled. "Is this okay?" I squeezed his hand back and smiled. "It is." That night, I realized I was in love again, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel guilty. I sat in my living room, looking at Thomas's photograph on the mantel. I waited for the guilt to come, the feeling that I was doing something wrong, but it didn't come. Instead, I felt something like permission, like Thomas was telling me it was okay to be happy again. "I met someone," I whispered to the photograph. "His name is Robert. He's kind and patient and makes me laugh. I think you'd like him. I hope you'd understand." The house was silent, but I felt a sense of peace settle over me. Thomas would want me to be happy. I knew that with absolute certainty. My phone rang. It was Robert. "I know it's late," he said, "but I was just thinking about you and wanted to hear your voice." "I'm glad you called," I said, smiling. "I was just thinking about you too." "Good thoughts, I hope?" "Very good thoughts." We talked until nearly midnight, about nothing important and everything important. When we finally said goodnight, I realized I was excited about tomorrow in a way I hadn't been in years. I was excited about the future. I was excited about possibilities. I was ready to live again. The news that I was seeing Robert spread quickly through the family. The reaction was mixed. My sister Patricia was thrilled, hugging me and saying I deserved to be happy. Some distant cousins made veiled comments, as if I were betraying Thomas's memory, but it was Jennifer who worried me most. She was happy for me, but also apprehensive. I noticed it in her visits, in the way she looked at Robert when he was at my house, in how she avoided mentioning her father when he was around. One day, I sat with her in the kitchen while Robert was in the living room leafing through a magazine. "Honey, I need you to be honest with me. What are you feeling?" Jennifer sighed, stirring her coffee absent-mindedly. "I don't know, Mom. I'm happy to see you smiling again, but it's also strange, seeing you with someone other than Dad." I held her hand. "I know, and it's strange for me too, but I promise you, I will never forget your father. He was the love of my life, but he's gone, Jen, and I'm still here, and I don't want to spend the rest of my days alone." She looked at me with watery eyes. "I know, Mom, and I want you to be happy, really. It's just difficult, I know, but we'll get through this together, okay?" She nodded, and we hugged. Over the weeks that followed, Jennifer slowly began to warm up to Robert. It helped that he never tried to replace Thomas, never overstepped boundaries, never forced a relationship. He was consistently respectful, giving Jennifer space while remaining friendly and kind. One Sunday, we all had dinner together at my house. Jennifer, Daniel, Robert, and me. At first, the conversation was a bit stilted, everyone being overly polite. But then, Daniel told a funny story about a mishap at his office, and we all started laughing. The ice broke. After dinner, while the men were doing dishes, a task Robert had insisted on, Jennifer pulled me aside. "Mom, I owe you an apology." "For what, sweetheart?" "For making this harder than it needed to be. He's really nice. I can see how happy he makes you, and that's what matters." I felt tears spring to my eyes. "Thank you, honey. That means everything to me. Dad would approve, you know. He always said he wanted you to be happy no matter what." "He did say that, didn't he?" I remembered. In his final days, Thomas had held my hand and made me promise not to shut myself off from the world. At the time, I'd thought he was just being dramatic. Now I understood he'd been giving me permission to move forward. With time, Jennifer began to truly accept Robert. He never tried to be her father, never tried to occupy that space, but he was kind, respectful, present. He participated in family dinners, helped Daniel with small repairs at their house, talked with Jennifer about her plans to have children. Robert also introduced me to his friends and family. His son Daniel had welcomed me from the beginning, saying he'd never seen his father so happy since Margaret's death. But not everyone was so accepting. Robert had a sister, Catherine, who lived across the country but visited occasionally. When she came for a visit about 6 months into our relationship, her reaction was, "Cool, it's just so soon after Margaret," I overheard her saying to Robert in his kitchen. I'd come back early from the store and they didn't know I'd returned. 4 years might seem like a long time to you, but for those of us who loved her, it feels like yesterday. Catherine, I loved Margaret for 35 years. I will always love her, but she's gone, and Lucy isn't replacing her. She's something different, something new. But you're forgetting. I'm not forgetting anything, Robert said firmly. I remember every moment with Margaret, but I'm also choosing to have new moments with Lucy. Those two things can coexist. There was a long silence, and then I heard Catherine sigh. I just miss her, Robbie. I know. I miss her too. Every single day, but she wouldn't want me to stop living. I quietly retreated back outside and made a noisy entrance a few minutes later, giving them time to compose themselves. Catherine was polite to me during her visit, but distant. I understood. I wasn't offended. Grief makes people protective of memories. My own family wasn't perfect about it either. My brother, Michael, who lived in California and rarely called, suddenly had lots of opinions about my life choices. Don't you think you're moving a bit fast? He asked during one phone call. You barely know this guy. I've been seeing him for 6 months, Michael, and I'm 63 years old. I think I'm capable of making my own decisions. I'm just saying, Thomas hasn't even been gone that long. It's been 3 years, Michael. 3 years, and you didn't call once in the year after he died. You didn't see how lonely I was, how dark things got, so forgive me if I don't take your advice now. The line was silent for a moment. Then Michael said quietly, You're right, I'm sorry. I should have been there more. Yes, you should have, but you're here now and I appreciate the concern. I really do. Just trust that I know what I'm doing, okay? Okay, Lucy. If he makes you happy, that's what matters. He does. Very much. It was after almost a year of dating that Robert asked me the question I never imagined hearing again. We were sitting on the porch of his house watching the sunset when he took my hand and said, Lucy, these months with you have been the happiest of my life since losing Margaret. You made me believe it's possible to start over, that it's possible to love again. I know we're not young anymore, that we've already lived so much, but I'd like to live what's still to come by your side. Would you move in here? Let's live together? Build something new? Together? I looked at him, feeling tears stream down my face. They weren't tears of sadness, but of gratitude, of relief, of happiness. Yes, Robert, I want to. He pulled me into his arms, and we sat there as the sun set, holding each other, both of us amazed that life had given us this unexpected second chance. I moved into Robert's house 3 months later. It was an exciting and frightening process at the same time. Leaving the house where I'd built a life with Thomas, where I'd raised Jennifer, where I'd lived so many memories, wasn't easy, but I also knew I couldn't live imprisoned by the past forever. Robert was patient. He helped me organize my things, respected my time, created spaces in the house where I could place my books, my photos, my memories. His house, now ours, became a welcoming place, full of life and laughter. The process of merging 2 households, 2 lives, 2 sets of memories was more complicated than I'd anticipated. Robert had lived in his house for over 30 years. Every corner held a memory of Margaret, just as every box I unpacked held memories of Thomas. We had to navigate this carefully, honoring the past while building our future. Where should we put this? Robert asked, holding up a framed photograph of Thomas and me from our honeymoon. I'd like it on the shelf in the bedroom if that's okay with you. Of course it is. And I'll keep this one of Margaret and me here in the study. Our past is part of who we are. We shouldn't hide it. Thank you for understanding that. Thank you for understanding it too, he said, gesturing to the photographs of Margaret that still occupied several spaces in the house. Some people would want me to pack all of this away. These are your memories, Robert. Our partners shaped us into the people we are today. We honor them by keeping their memory alive. He kissed my forehead gently. I love you, Lucy. It was the first time either of us had said those words. I looked up at him, my heart full. I love you too. Jennifer and Daniel visited us regularly. We had Sunday dinners together, played cards, talked about future plans. There was a harmony among us that I never imagined possible. One Sunday, Jennifer made an announcement that took my breath away. Mom, Robert, she said, her hand clasped in Daniel's. We're pregnant. The room erupted in joyful chaos. I hugged my daughter, crying happy tears. Robert shook Daniel's hand vigorously and then pulled him into a hug. We were all laughing and crying at once. When are you due? I asked. 6 months. We wanted to wait until the first trimester was over before telling anyone. A grandchild, I breathed. Oh, Thomas would have been so thrilled. Jennifer's eyes filled with tears. I know, Mom. I wish he could be here. He is, I said firmly. He's here with you, in this baby. His love doesn't end just because he's not physically here. Robert put his arm around my shoulders. And this baby will have 4 grandparents who loved them, 2 who are here, and 2 who will watch over them from wherever they are now. It was such a beautiful way of putting it that we all fell silent for a moment, absorbing the truth of it. As Jennifer's pregnancy progressed, I found myself busier and happier than I'd been in years. Jennifer and I went shopping for baby things. Robert and Daniel painted the nursery, and we all speculated about names and whether it would be a boy or girl. One evening, Robert and I were organizing baby clothes, tiny socks and onesies that seemed impossibly small. I never thought I'd do this again, Robert said. Be preparing for a grandchild. It feels like a gift. It is a gift, I agreed. A beautiful reminder that life continues, that love multiplies rather than divides. You know what I was thinking? Robert folded a small yellow blanket carefully. This baby will never know Thomas or Margaret, but they'll grow up hearing stories about them. They'll know they were loved by people they never met. That's a lovely thought. And they'll grow up seeing that it's possible to love deeply, lose tragically, and find love again. That's not a bad lesson for a child to learn. I smiled. No, it's not. It's actually a beautiful lesson. The baby arrived on a warm spring day. A girl with Jennifer's eyes and Daniel's chin. They named her Emma Rose. Her middle name, Rose, was after both Margaret, whose favorite flower was roses, and Thomas, who always brought me roses on our anniversary. When I held Emma for the first time, I felt an overwhelming sense of continuity. This tiny person was the future, the living proof that love survives beyond loss, that families evolve and grow and continue. Robert stood beside me, his hand on my shoulder, looking down at our granddaughter with wonder. "Hello, little one," I whispered. "I'm your Grandma Lucy, and this is your Grandpa Robert. We love you so much already." On one night, while Robert and I were lying in bed, I thought about everything that had happened. About Thomas's death, about the dark days that followed, about the wedding where I sat alone, about the stranger who sat beside me and changed everything. "You know what I thought when I first saw you in that church?" Robert asked, as if reading my mind. I looked at him, curious. "What?" I thought. "That woman shouldn't be alone. You had an elegance, a quiet strength that caught my attention. And when I sat next to you, I felt like I was doing the right thing." I smiled, squeezing his hand. "And you were. You changed my life, Robert. You changed mine too, Lucy." That night, lying next to him, I thought of Thomas. I felt his presence, not as a pain, but as a sweet memory, a love that would always be part of me. And then I thought of Robert, about how he had unexpectedly entered my life, about how he showed me that it's possible to love again, in a different way, but equally profound. Life gives us second chances when we least expect them, and sometimes all we need is the courage to accept them. In the quiet darkness of our bedroom, I reflected on the journey that brought me here, the grief that nearly consumed me, the loneliness that made days feel endless. The moment when a kind stranger offered me a simple gesture of companionship. I thought about how scared I'd been to call him, how guilty I'd felt when I first realized I had feelings for him, how long it took me to accept that moving forward wasn't the same as forgetting. "What are you thinking about?" Robert asked softly. "Everything. Nothing. How grateful I am." "Me too." "Robert?" "Yes?" "Do you think they would have liked each other? Thomas and Margaret?" He thought about it for a moment. "I think they would have been friends. Margaret would have loved Thomas's sense of humor, and Thomas would have appreciated Margaret's kindness. I like to think they're somewhere together, happy that we found each other." "I like to think that too." I closed my eyes, feeling Robert's steady breathing beside me, and smiled. For the first time in years, I wasn't just existing. I wasn't just surviving. I was truly, deeply happy. The next morning, I woke up early and made coffee, standing at the kitchen window watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. Robert came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist and resting his chin on my shoulder. "Beautiful morning," he murmured. "Beautiful life," I corrected. And it was. Not perfect. Life never is, not without sadness or loss or challenges, but beautiful nonetheless, full of love, both old and new, full of memories that sustained me and dreams that excited me, full of a past I cherished and a future I looked forward to. I turned in Robert's arms and kissed him, tasting coffee and contentment, and the promise of many more mornings just like this one. "I love you," I said. "I love you too. Always, always." It's a word that means different things at different times in our lives. With Thomas, always meant forever, until death parted us. With Robert, always means for whatever time we have left, making the most of every moment, appreciating the gift of a second chance. We stood there in the kitchen, holding each other as the sun rose, and I realized something important. You can carry love with you even as you walk toward something new. The heart doesn't have a limited capacity. It expands to hold everything: grief and joy, memory and hope, yesterday and tomorrow. Later that week, I did something I'd been thinking about for months. I went back to my old house, the one I'd shared with Thomas. The new owners had been kind enough to let me visit the garden one last time. I stood in the backyard where Thomas and I had spent countless evenings, where we'd watched Jennifer learn to walk, where we'd celebrated anniversaries and birthdays and ordinary Tuesdays that turned out to be extraordinary simply because we were together. I placed my hand on the old oak tree we'd planted together 30 years ago. It had grown tall and strong, its branches reaching toward the sky. "Thank you," I whispered. "Thank you for the life we built here. Thank you for loving me. Thank you for Jennifer. Thank you for every single day. Even the hard ones, especially the hard ones, because they made me who I am." I felt a gentle breeze, and I chose to believe it was Thomas, telling me it was okay, telling me he understood, telling me to go live, to be happy, to love Robert with the same fullness I'd loved him. As I drove back to Robert's house, our house, I felt lighter than I had in years. The past would always be part of me, but it no longer held me captive. I could visit it, honor it, cherish it, and then return to the present where life was happening right now. When I walked through the door, Robert was in the kitchen making lunch. He looked up and smiled, and my heart did a little flip, the way it used to with Thomas in the early days. "Good visit?" he asked. "Perfect visit," I said, walking into his embrace. I said goodbye. He held me tight, understanding without needing explanation. "I'm proud of you. I'm proud of us," I corrected. That evening, Jennifer called with exciting news. Little Emma had taken her first steps. We drove over immediately, and Robert and I sat on the floor with our granddaughter, encouraging her to walk between us. She tottered back and forth, giggling with delight each time she made it across the small distance. "Look at her go," Robert said. His face lit up with joy. "She's going to be running marathons before we know it, just like her mother," I said, remembering how Jennifer had been an early walker too, always in a hurry to explore the world. Daniel captured the moment on video, and later as we drove home, Robert said, "I'm going to send that video to Catherine. She needs to see this." "How is she doing?" I asked. Robert's sister had remained distant, but was slowly coming around. "Better. She called last week and actually asked about you. Real questions, not just polite ones. That's progress." "It is. She said something interesting. She said she realized she wasn't upset about me moving on. She was upset about her own loneliness. She's been alone for so long, and seeing me happy made her confront that. That's very self-aware of her." I told her what you said, about the heart expanding to hold everything. She said she'd think about that. As the months turned into years, Robert and I built a life that was uniquely ours while still honoring what came before. We traveled, something neither of us had done much since losing our spouses. We visited the Grand Canyon, walked along California beaches, toured historical sites in Boston, and spent a magical week in Charleston where we ate too much good food and walked hand in hand through beautiful gardens. We also established routines and rituals. Sunday dinners with Jennifer, Daniel, and Emma became sacred. We joined a book club together, where we were known as the couple who always disagrees about the ending. Robert took up painting in retirement, and I started writing again, something I'd abandoned decades ago. One afternoon, I was working on a short story when Robert came into the study. "What are you writing?" he asked. "A love story. Fiction or nonfiction?" he asked with a knowing smile. "Both," I admitted. "It's inspired by us, but it's not exactly us. The characters are younger, the setting is different, but the heart of it, the heart is ours. Can I read it when you're done? You'll be the first." He kissed the top of my head and went back to his painting. This was our life now, parallel activities in comfortable silence, each of us pursuing our passions while staying connected. It was different from what I'd had with Thomas, who was more social and preferred us to do everything together. But it wasn't better or worse. It was just different, and that was okay. Emma grew from a toddler to a bright, curious 5-year-old who loved books almost as much as I did. Every Thursday, she came to our house for Grandma Lucy's story time, where I'd read to her, and then we'd act out the stories. Robert would often join in, playing the dragon or the giant or whatever villain the story required, making Emma shriek with delighted laughter. One Thursday, after story time, Emma climbed into my lap and said, "Grandma Lucy, Mommy showed me pictures of Grandpa Thomas. She said he died before I was born." My heart clenched, but I kept my voice steady. "That's right, sweetheart. Was he nice?" "He was wonderful. He was funny and kind, And he would have loved you so, so much, like Grandpa Robert loves me, exactly like that. She thought about this for a moment, her little face serious. Mommy says it's okay to love people even when they're gone. She says love doesn't die. Your mommy is very wise. I love Grandpa Thomas even though I never met him, Emma declared. And I love Grandpa Robert because he makes you smile and he's really good at being a dragon. I hugged her close, tears streaming down my face. You know what, Emma Rose? You're pretty wise too. That night, I told Robert about the conversation. We were in bed, reading before sleep, another one of our rituals. That kid is something special, Robert said, setting down his book. She really is. And you know what amazed me? How easily she understood that love isn't finite, that you can love multiple people, that past and present can coexist. Children often understand things better than adults. We're the ones who complicate everything. When did you become so philosophical? He laughed. When I fell in love with a literature teacher who makes me think about everything more deeply. 5 years turned into 10. Emma started middle school. Jennifer and Daniel had a second child, a boy named Thomas Robert, named after both grandfathers. Robert and I celebrated our own milestone. We'd been together for a decade. We decided to have a small celebration. Just family. As we sat around the dinner table, Jennifer, Daniel, Emma, little Tommy, Robert's sister Catherine, who had finally warmed up to me, my sister Patricia and her husband, I looked around and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. I'd like to make a toast, Robert said, standing up with his wine glass. 10 years ago, I sat down next to a beautiful woman in a church, and I had no idea that moment would change my entire life. Lucy, you gave me a reason to believe in second chances. You taught me that love doesn't end. It evolves. You showed me that it's possible to honor the past while embracing the future. These have been the best 10 years of my life, and I look forward to however many more we get. There wasn't a dry eye at the table. I stood up and kissed him, to applause and whistles from our family. My turn, I said, raising my own glass. I came to my daughter's wedding feeling like my life was over. I was going through the motions, existing, but not really living. And then a stranger sat down beside me and whispered, "Pretend you're with me." Robert, you saved me that day, not because I needed rescuing, but because you reminded me that I wasn't alone. You've been my companion, my best friend, my love. You've given me a reason to wake up excited about the day ahead. You've shown me that the heart has infinite capacity for love. Thank you for choosing me, for being patient with me, for loving me. To Lucy and Robert, Jennifer called out, and everyone echoed the toast. Later, as we were cleaning up the kitchen, Emma, now a thoughtful 13-year-old, said to me, "Grandma, can I ask you something?" "Of course, sweetheart. Does it ever feel weird, loving Grandpa Robert when you loved Grandpa Thomas so much?" I dried my hands and turned to face her, giving her question the serious consideration it deserved. At first, yes. It felt strange and even wrong sometimes. I felt guilty, like I was betraying your grandfather's memory. But then I realized something important. Love isn't betrayal. Choosing to be happy again isn't forgetting. Your heart doesn't have a limited capacity, Emma. It grows to hold everything you need it to hold. So you love them both? At the same time, I love your Grandpa Thomas in memory. He'll always be my first love, the father of my child, the man I built a life with. That love is preserved in the past, like a beautiful photograph. And I love Grandpa Robert in the present. It's a different kind of love, but it's just as real and just as deep. They don't cancel each other out. They coexist. Emma nodded slowly, absorbing this. I think I understand. It's like how I'll always love the house we used to live in, but I also love our house now. I don't have to choose. Exactly like that. You're a very smart young lady, Emma Rose. She hugged me tight. I'm glad you found Grandpa Robert. I'm glad you didn't stay sad forever. Me too, sweetheart. Me too. As the years continued to pass, Robert and I grew old together. Really old. We both developed the aches and pains that come with age. Robert's hearing wasn't what it used to be, and my knees protested every time I climbed stairs. But we faced these challenges together, with humor and grace. We celebrated our 15th anniversary quietly, just the two of us on the same porch where Robert had asked me to move in all those years ago. "Do you ever have regrets?" I asked him. "About what?" "About us. About starting over so late in life. We don't have as much time as we would have if we'd met when we were younger." Robert was quiet for a long moment, considering his answer carefully. "No," he finally said. "I don't have regrets. Yes, I wish we had more time. I wish I'd met you decades ago so we could have built an entire lifetime together. But the truth is, I wouldn't have been ready for you then. I needed to live my life with Margaret, to love her and lose her and learn from that experience. You needed to live your life with Thomas. We became who we are through those experiences. The people we were at 30 couldn't have appreciated what we have now. That's beautifully put. Besides, he added with a mischievous smile, quality matters more than quantity. These 15 years with you have been richer and fuller than many people's entire lifetimes. You're a romantic, Robert Morrison. Only with you, Lucy Morrison. I'd taken his last name. Something I'd debated long and hard about. Jennifer had supported whatever I decided, saying it was my choice and no one else's. In the end, I'd chosen to become Lucy Morrison while still honoring my past as Lucy Patterson. Both names were on my driver's license. Both identities acknowledged. On my 78th birthday, our entire family gathered for a celebration. Emma brought her new boyfriend, a nice young man studying engineering. Tommy, now 8 years old, performed a magic show he'd been practicing for weeks. Jennifer and Daniel looked at each other with the comfortable love of a couple who'd weathered life's ups and downs together. Robert's son Daniel pulled me aside at one point during the party. "Lucy, I need to thank you," he said. "For what?" "For giving my dad a second chapter. After Mom died, I was so worried about him. He went through all the motions, but there was no light in his eyes. And then he met you, and he came back to life. You did that. He did the same for me," I said. "We saved each other. That's the best kind of love story." As the party wound down and guests began to leave, I found myself standing in the backyard, looking up at the stars. Robert came to stand beside me, wrapping a blanket around my shoulders. "Cold?" he asked. "A little, but mostly just thinking." "About what?" "About that day in the church. About how my life could have gone so differently if you hadn't sat down next to me. If I hadn't called you. If I'd let fear win. I would have missed all of this. But you didn't let fear win. You were brave. We were both brave." We stood there in comfortable silence. Two old people who'd found each other late in life and made the most of every moment given to them. "Lucy?" "Yes?" "When my time comes, and I hope it's a long time from now, I don't want you to shut down again. I want you to keep living. Keep being open to whatever comes next." "Robert, I mean it. Promise me. You're too full of life to waste it on grief. Honor me. Remember me. Love me. But don't stop living." I turned to face him, tears streaming down my face. "I promise. But I'm going to need the same promise from you." "Deal," he said, pulling me close. "So I fully intend for us to go together when we're 95? In our sleep? Holding hands?" I laughed through my tears. "That's a good plan. I'm an architect. I'm good at plans." We went inside, arm in arm, to rejoin our family. As I looked around at the people gathered in our home, children and grandchildren and extended family, all connected by love in its many forms, I felt a profound sense of peace. My life hadn't turned out the way I'd planned. I'd experienced devastating loss and profound grief. I'd sat alone at my daughter's wedding, feeling like my story was over. But then a stranger had sat down beside me and offered a simple kindness, and everything changed. I'd learned that life doesn't end when your spouse dies. It transforms. The love you shared doesn't disappear. It becomes part of your foundation, helping you build something new. I'd learned that you can honor your past while embracing your future, that the heart has infinite capacity, that it's never too late for a new beginning. And most importantly, I'd learned that sometimes the best moments in life are the ones you never saw coming. The unexpected encounters, the second chances, the whispered words in a church that change everything. Pretend you're with me. Because in the end, we weren't pretending at all. We were building something real, something beautiful, something worth every moment of uncertainty and fear it took to get there. That night, as Robert and I prepared for bed, going through our well-worn routines, I caught sight of our reflection in the bathroom mirror. Two old people, wrinkled and gray, but with eyes that still sparkled when we looked at each other. "What are you smiling about?" Robert asked. "Us," I said simply. "I'm smiling about us." He came to stand behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist the way he'd done thousands of times before. "I love you, Lucy Morrison." "I love you too, Robert Morrison." And as we turned off the lights and climbed into bed, I felt nothing but gratitude for the life I'd lived with Thomas, for the years I had with Robert, for the family we'd created together, and for that moment in a church 15 years ago when a kind stranger offered me his hand and I was brave enough to take it. The story of my life wasn't over that day. It was just beginning a new chapter, and what a beautiful chapter it turned out to be.